Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced early presidential and parliamentary elections on Wednesday.
In a surprise move this week, the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, and the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, have announced that they have agreed to hold snap presidential and parliamentary elections on June 24th, more than a year before the pre-scheduled date. The call came from MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli, who had previously allied with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AKP for next year's general and presidential elections. Bahçeli suggested the early elections take place on August 26th. The MHP leader said it would be difficult for the country to endure current circumstances until then, pointing to risks from rising economic concerns and possible increases in migration into the country. Addressing his deputies, Bahçeli said it should be known that the MHP wants early elections after the adjustment laws are fully passed, referring to the laws formally shifting Turkey to an executive presidential system. In response to Bahçeli's comments, President Erdogan said the two-party leaders would meet to discuss the issue on April 18th. The definitive statement on the snap vote came from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in a televised speech on April 18th after a brief meeting with his ally Bahçeli. We have widely discussed the proposal of Mr. Bahçeli in our executive board. We have decided to give a positive response to this proposal on holding early elections. The intensification of Turkey's internal and external agenda has obliged us to remove the uncertainties in front of us through early elections, Erdogan told reporters. Erdogan added that ongoing military operations in Syria, regional developments and macroeconomic pressures create an urgency for Turkey to immediately start implementing its presidential model instead of waiting for November 2019. The Turkish Parliament's Constitutional Committee approved a motion on Thursday seeking early presidential and parliamentary elections on June 24th. The bill was signed by Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım and MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli. The Parliament's General Assembly passed the bill today. Speaking at his party's headquarters, CHP spokesman Bülent Tezcan said that they are ready for an election and accepted the challenge. As CHP, we are ready for elections. We are ready as if it would be even held tomorrow, Tezcan said. The People's Democratic Party HDP spokesperson Ayhan Bilgen said that there were no reasonable grounds for elections to take place as soon as possible. Bilgen added that the HDP was ready for elections at any date. The chairwoman of the Good Party, Meral Akşener, said that her party had no reservations about early elections. The Good Party is the most ready party for the elections, Akşener added. Upcoming elections have a historic importance as they mark the beginning of the implementation of the executive presidency model, abolishing the prime ministry. The president will need to get at least 50% plus one vote to be elected in the first round. If no contenders receive a simple majority, the two top candidates will run in the second round of presidential elections 2 weeks later on July 8th. Although not yet officially announced, President Erdogan will be the joint candidate of the AKP-MHP alliance. If successful, he will be able to rule the country until 2023, with a chance to be re-elected for a second term.
Joining us tonight to comment on the upcoming snap elections scheduled for June 24th is Cem Toker, who is the former chairman of the Liberal Democratic Party. Good evening, Mr. Toker. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Good evening. Thank you.
So what do you think, what in your opinion led the government, or the governing bloc rather, comprising of the ruling AKP and the MHP, to call for early elections? And more importantly, was this a surprise to you?
the election, early elections is not a surprise, but this early is a surprise. Let me, if I may, set the background for your viewers so that they will not be misled, assuming Turkey is a democracy anymore. Because they may be misled by elections, parliament, presidential, snap elections, what have you, because elections are the last indicator of a democracy. Because Putin held elections in Russia, Sisi held elections in Egypt, Assad a few years ago held elections in Syria. So major elements of a democracy is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, right to assembly, freedom to disseminate information, freedom for access to information. So, and let's see where Turkey ranks on these freedoms. With let me give you examples from extremely very credible indices. For example, Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index. Turkey ranks 100th out of 167 nations in Democracy Index. World Justice Project says Turkey ranks 101st in Rule of Law Index. Reporters Without Borders puts Turkey 155th out of 178 countries in Freedom of Press Index. Freedom House says Turkey is not a free country anymore. So, and these rankings are dismal, and Turkey has been declining. So, in my opinion, with a record like this, it doesn't matter if you hold early elections, late elections, or you can hold elections every Sunday or not hold elections at all. I don't think anything will change. But the reason, let me get back to your question now that I have laid the background for Turkey. I believe the reason behind this snap election decision is 70% economic and 30% political, because Turkey is doing dismally in its economy right now because of the figures that I shared with your viewers.
Thank you, Mr. Toker. And do you think the government at the moment is ready for these snap elections?
Government, I am sure they feel ready because they're the ones who called it. And because, like I said, Turkey has been a one-man regime in the last at least 5-6 years. So the one-man regime, in a one-man regime, they control everything. They control the entire budget. There is no checks and balances. There is no separation of powers. They control the judiciary. They control the legislative body. He controls the executive office. So I am sure they feel confident that they will win with no problems at all.
So you've suggested that the motivations behind this decision to hold early elections was, I quote you, 30% political. Perhaps this may connect with my next question. To what extent do you think the rise of the Good Party under the leadership of Meral Akşener may have played a role in the government's decision to hold these early elections?
Played a major role, I believe, because she was a substantial opponent or a proponent, actually, and she did pose a big threat to Erdogan's one-man regime. So, and because the way she broke up from the Nationalist Party, the leader of the Nationalist Party also wanted her to be excluded from the political scene. So this is why they call I don't call it a snap election, it's actually a snatching election, you know, hit and run, with only 66 days of notice, and no legislative background has been even laid yet. regarding the details of the election. So this, you're right. She was a extremely strong opponent, and she did pose a threat to the one-man rule.
So you've mentioned the political reasons. Let's now come to the economic reasons and consequences too, perhaps. What kind of an impact do you think these elections, these early elections, will have on the markets and the economy? It's no secret that that the current performance of the economy and the government's overall macroeconomic concerns have been a major factor in the run-up to this decision. And how do you think it will affect the economy?
I don't think it will affect the economy at all. The economy has been declining. It's doing worse and worse. It's not an economic crisis in Turkey. It's a political crisis because foreign capital and domestic capital is fleeing Turkey, where you don't have any rule of law or justice or independent judiciary. Money just takes away and takes off to safe harbors. So even the president himself indicated just very recently that the well is dry. Or just a few weeks ago, he ordered a few banks to provide small business with respiratory credit to small businesses. So the deputy prime minister in charge of the economy, Mehmet Şimşek, he did say, you know, the Turkish economy was not in good shape, and he was reprimanded for that, for saying that by Erdogan. So it is very fragile. So the ruling party and Erdogan must have thought, you know, the U.S. dollar, Turkish lira is at its historic lowest in history. So it is better to hold election while the dollar is 4 liras, because next year it may be 5 or 6 or 7, even worse. So Turkish economy the situation of the economy played an important role in this early election decision of the government.
And how do you evaluate the current performance of the opposition parties in responding to this early election decision by the government?
I don't want to let the opposition, the inability of especially major opposition party off the hook, but I must tell you, strong opposition leaders and parties exist in democracies. You know, like I said, Turkey has been an autocracy for the longest time, controlled by one man. A good example of this is Good Party. Good Party, like I said, brought about solid opposition, good policies, and it posed a threat to the one-man rule, one-man government, and that is why they're being banned from participating in the election. So, but on the other hand, CHP's record is dismal as an opposition party. They had, let me take you back to 2007, when Turkey decided to let presidents be elected by the popular vote rather than the parliament. CHP knew this in 2007. They did nothing for 7 years until 2014, until 7 weeks left for the elections. Then they came up with a candidate, not even from their party, but a conservative, religious conservative candidate who nobody knew his name, nobody could memorize his name. He didn't represent the values of the Social Democratic CHP. And they're doing the same thing again. They knew there's gonna be a presidential election, and they're not prepared for it. They're still in big chaos. They don't know who they're gonna pick, what their strategy is. So it is dismal. So it's both ways. The system doesn't permit the opposition parties to bring about solid policies and pose a viable competition in the elections. On the other hand, that is topped with the inability of opposition parties to come with strong and good alternative policies for Turkey.
Mr. Toker, finally, what's your overall take on the potential presidential candidates?
Well, I know of only one right now. Potential candidates, if good party leader Mrs. Akşener is permitted to run, she will bring a good competition to Erdogan, and I believe Erdogan is skeptical of Meral Akşener, and it will depend on CHP who they will nominate as their candidate. If it is the head of the CHP, Kılıçdaroğlu, forget it. You may as well forget it. Then again, on the other hand, let me bring one last point. After seeing what happened last year on April 16th, how the election board ruled on counting the ballots that were not officially stamped and so on. So I have a lot of doubts on fair and open and democratic elections coming up on June 24th.
Mr. Toker, thank you very much for joining us tonight and for your comments.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
We'll continue with our next news video on Turkey's upcoming early elections.
Following President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's announcement on Wednesday that early presidential and parliamentary elections were being planned for June 24th, all political parties that will run in the election will have less than 2 months to choose their candidates, both for presidency and the parliamentary seats. In addition, the parliament will need to approve adjustment laws regarding the elections and political parties in order for them to become compatible with the executive presidential system. The adjustment laws will also clarify how independent candidates will be able to run in the presidential election. According to the constitutional amendment, political party groups and parties that received at least 5% of the vote in the last general election will be able to nominate an individual or joint candidate for presidential elections. In addition to this procedure, those who are able to collect at least 100,000 signatures may run for the presidency. The main opposition Republican People's Party (CHP) and the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party (HDP) are yet to reveal their presidential candidates. CHP's deputy chairman and former Turkish Consul General Öztürk Yılmaz announced his presidential candidacy earlier today, saying that he will contest if CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu does not become a candidate. Istanbul deputy Didem Engin was another CHP candidate who announced their presidential candidacy today. Engin declared that she was planning to announce her candidacy at a press conference. Meanwhile, writer and public figure Levent Gültekin announced his independent candidacy in a video he shared on social media. In his video, Gültekin said, "This is not a snap vote. This is a hijacking. The government is hijacking the country. We cannot accept this. We are the children of this country. We cannot give up our rights. Together, we will reclaim our future. This is why I am running as a presidential candidate, and I am awaiting for you to lend me a hand." The Good Party's leader Meral Akşener, on the other hand, has also vowed to run in Turkey's early presidential election and to collect the 100,000 signatures necessary to be a candidate. "I know Turkey is tired of tension," Akşener said on Wednesday after the announcement of the snap elections. "The Good Party will run in the election and will win," Akşener added, while also stating that the government and the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, called for an early elections because they are afraid. Akşener further emphasized that the Good Party has convened its Congress on time, as the election law requires holding a Congress for a new party 6 months in advance, in order to be able to run in the next election. The Good Party was founded in October last year under the leadership of Akşener, a former senior MHP official who was expelled from the party amid disagreements with Devlet Bahçeli. The party has currently 5 seats at parliament, made up of 4 former MHP lawmakers and 1 former CHP deputy.
The European Commission published its harshest ever progress report on Turkey this week.
Turkey is regressing in several areas, says the European Commission annual report, which was published on Tuesday. The report is the Commission's harshest criticism yet of Ankara's efforts to join the European Union. The report also rules out any further progress in Turkey's accession in the current situation. "I'm afraid the country continues to make huge strides away from the EU," said European Commissioner for Enlargement Johannes Hahn at a news conference. The Commission repeatedly called on Turkey to reverse this trend as a matter of priority and make very clear recommendation on this in today's report. The Commission issues an annual progress report on all EU applicants from fields covering human rights to the economy. This year's findings are widely considered among the most critical in Ankara's decades-long membership bid, with particular criticism in the areas of justice, public administrative reform, fundamental rights, and freedom of expression. The Commission strongly criticized the crackdown after the 2016 failed coup attempt, calling for an end to the state of emergency without any delay. The report ruled out any further progress in Ankara's membership bid, saying, "Under the current circumstances, it's unthinkable to open up new accession chapters." However, Turkey's hosting of refugees, mainly from the Syrian civil war, was praised, with the Commission describing outstanding efforts to provide for the 4 million refugees in the country. Despite the critical report, relations are predicted to continue. Turkey is a key strategic neighbor and we will continue our cooperation, said EU Enlargement Commissioner Hahn. Turkey's EU Affairs Minister Ömer Çelik told reporters that the EU Commission's report does not present fair and objective criticism. The report is far from encouraging closer relations between Turkey and the EU. "We are not afraid of criticism, but this approach lacks fairness," said the minister. The minister also criticized that the report portrayed the Fethullahist terrorist organization as an innocent, non-governmental organization. Turkey's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that the EU is unwilling to understand the difficulties Turkey is facing. The report is far from understanding the realities of Turkey and thus far from serving its purpose. In addition, it places the unfair interests of its obvious members before a universal concept such as the rule of law and thus negates the EU's own values. Despite all the negativity in the EU's approach, EU membership continues to remain our strategic priority, said the ministry.
The state of emergency was extended for another 3 months by the Turkish parliament on Wednesday.
The Turkish parliament extended the ongoing state of emergency for another 3 months on Wednesday. This is the 7th time that the state of emergency has been extended. The last time was in January. The state of emergency was extended with the votes of the ruling Justice and Development Party, the AKP, and the Nationalist Movement Party, the MHP. It was first imposed on July the 20th, 2016, 5 days after the failed coup attempt. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced at that time that it would enable authorities to take swift action against those responsible for the attempt. Wednesday's extension means the upcoming early elections on June the 24th will be held under the emergency rule, despite widespread disapproval from opposition parties. Main opposition Republican People's Party spokesperson Bülent Tezcan urged the government not to extend the state of emergency over worries that it would cast shadow over the elections. The state of emergency needs to be lifted immediately. You cannot hold elections during an emergency rule. The country needs to be brought out of the state of emergency now, he said.
A court ruled on Monday that the jailed American pastor Andrew Brunson would remain in custody.
A Turkish court ruled on April the 16th to keep the American Christian pastor Andrew Brunson in custody, deeming him to be a flight risk after the first court hearing. Brunson, who ran a Protestant church in Izmir, has been detained by Turkish authorities since October 2016. If convicted, he risks up to wearing a black suit, speaking fluent Turkish, and sometimes bursting into tears. Brunson rejected all the charges against him. He is accused of engaging in activities on behalf of the PKK and the group led by Fethullah Gülen, whom Ankara accuses of being behind the failed coup attempt of 2016. Brunson is also accused of espionage for political or military purposes. The judge ordered Brunson to stay in jail, setting the next hearing for May the 7th. The ruling was based on evidence given by witnesses in the case and the risk that Brunson might flee. He moved to the country in 1993 and opened his Izmir church in 2010. In September, Erdogan suggested that Turkey could free Brunson if Washington handed over Gülen, who lives in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania. Senator Tillis said there was no deal, adding, "This is about what we believe is an innocent man who has been in prison for a year and a half." In his statement to the court, Brunson rejected the accusations of links to Gülen's group, saying, "That would be an insult to my religion. I'm a Christian, I wouldn't join an Islamic movement." The Turkish Association of Protestant Churches said in a report that 2017 was marked by continued hate crimes and physical attacks. Brownback described the trial as a religious freedom case, saying Turkey in its history has been very open, so that's one of the things that's really troubling about this.
The United States, Britain and France launched a joint airstrike against the Assad government on Saturday morning.
A week after the alleged chemical attack in Syria on Saturday morning, the United States, Britain and France carried out a joint airstrike against the Assad regime. The attack was announced to be limited, targeting Syria's chemical weapons program. Following the attack, US President Donald Trump announced that the mission was accomplished. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Theresa May stated that the attack was in the national interest of the UK. Turkey welcomed the airstrikes as an appropriate response to the alleged chemical attack. "We welcome this operation, which has eased humanity's conscience in the face of the attack in Duma, largely suspected to have been carried out by the regime," the Turkish Foreign Ministry said in a statement. Speaking to Chinese President Xi Jinping, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also underlined that Turkey has always been against the use of chemical weapons, urging for the tensions in the region to calm down. Shortly after airstrikes, inspectors from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons came to Syria to investigate the alleged chemical attack. However, the inspection was delayed due to a gunfire at the site during a visit by a UN security team on Tuesday. The organization chief Ahmet Üzümcü said he didn't currently know when the organization inspectors could deploy to Duma. Meanwhile, the debate on whether the US forces will leave Syria is proceeding. French President Emmanuel Macron told reporters that he convinced President Donald Trump to stay in Syria and launch airstrikes as punishment for an alleged chemical weapons attack. US Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, also said that the US would not pull its troops out of Syria until its goals were accomplished. However, the White House spokesperson Sarah Sanders stated that the US mission has not changed. The president has been clear that he wants US forces to come home as quickly as possible. On Wednesday, Turkey and Russia held talks regarding the developments in Syria. The Russian Foreign Ministry stated that the consultations were held between a high-level Russian delegation and Turkish President's advisor Ibrahim Kalın and Turkish Foreign Ministry Deputy Undersecretary Sedat Önal.
Tension is mounting between Turkey and Greece in the Aegean Sea following a series of incidents that took place this week.
Tensions were running high between Greece and Turkey on the Aegean Sea this week. On Monday, Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım claimed that the Turkish Coast Guard had removed a Greek flag from an islet close to Didim after it was placed there by 3 Greek citizens. Greek authorities responded that no Turkish boat had been seen in the area and that the flag was still there. Turkey claims the islet is in the zone that is of disputed jurisdiction in the Aegean Sea. On Tuesday, Greek newspaper Katimerini reported that 2 Turkish Air Force fighter jets harassed a helicopter carrying Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras and the chief of the Hellenic National Defense General Staff. The helicopter was reportedly flying from the Greek islet of Rho to Rhodes. The Hellenic Air Force responded by sending its own jets, which caused the Turkish fighters to leave. The islet of Rho is situated very close to Turkish mainland and has been the site of territorial disputes in the past. On the same day, Turkish government spokesperson and Deputy Prime Minister Bekir Bozdağ stated that Greece had violated international law by not returning the 8 Turkish army members to Turkey who are believed to be suspects in the 2016 coup attempt. On Thursday, when the top court in Greece ordered the release of one of the 8 who have sought political asylum in Greece, the tensions raised again. The Turkish Foreign Ministry slammed the decision, accusing Athens of protecting the coup plotters. The Greek court ordered that the suspect remain under tight security at an undisclosed location amid fears for his safety. The same decision is expected to apply to the other 7. All these incidents follow a tragic accident last week in which a Greek pilot was killed after his plane crashed while returning to base from a mission to intercept Turkish fighter jets in the Aegean. Though Ankara was quick to send condolences to Greece, Greek public opinion blames the death of the pilot on Turkey. The arrest of 2 Greek army officers last month and their imprisonment in Turkey is further feeding their anger. Relations between Greece and Turkey have always been turbulent, although recent events make some analysts worried that the 2 NATO allies may be inching towards a war.
Now let's take a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
For lovers of vinyl, Saturday is a big day. They will be celebrating Record Store Day this weekend with a series of events attended by DJs and live bands. Record Store Day is an annual event inaugurated in 2007 and held on one Saturday every April to celebrate the culture of the independently owned record stores. Contraplak, a record store in Beyoğlu, has been celebrating the Record Store Day for many years. The event will start at 2:30 p.m. and will last for the entire day. Hera Films' Barbara Hammer Body Politics program presents the films and videos of the artist Barbara Hammer, a pioneer in avant-garde filmmaking. Hammer has been a solid voice in bringing topics and issues relating to gender and identity on to the moving image. Currently, Hammer lectures at the European Graduate School in Switzerland, and several of her retrospectives were showcased in prominent institutions including MoMA, New York, Tate Modern London, Jeu de Paume Paris in the last decade. The program includes 10 works of Barbara Hammer's oeuvre. At 6 p.m., her film Evidentiary Bodies will be screened. The film is her most recent work and had its world premiere in the Berlin Film Festival this year. Hammer's documentary trilogy on queer history, Nitrate Kisses, will be screened at 6 p.m. on Sunday.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.